Hey, Pammy here. I know it's been a couple of weeks since we last seen each other. We had a couple of holidays and I had graduations and all of those things. So I apologize for my absence. But I'm back with Locs Talk. I'm going to start making shorter videos and focusing on one topic at a time and not getting too talky and chatty about it. And just spread things out better that way as well. So today I'm going to talk about a condition called Loc Rot or moldy locks or dread rot. It's as nasty as it sounds, you know. I'm coming to you from my workstation that I work at, my kitchen table in the kitchen. So I'm going to jump right into it and let's go for it. Okay, here we go. Welcome to another week's of Locs Talk, where I talk about all things locks and loose natural hair care. I'm going to narrow down the topics I discuss in order to discuss them in full detail from now on, okay, as I just said a few seconds ago. This week's discussion will be focused on locks and one of the most common problems that occur with locks, a condition referred to as Loc Rot, dread rot, or moldy locks. I know how it must sound, and yes, it is as disgusting as it sounds. Loc Rot is a growth of fungus inside of the lock. Now, I'm putting emphasis on the word inside the lock because there has not been any documented scientific evidence of mold growing on the surface of the hair. However, when it comes to locks, we are talking about the hair that is enclosed within the lock. If you can recall my depiction of lock cycle with the use of the analogy of the life cycle of a butterfly and how the outer surface of the locks is sort of like a cocoon, the internal part of the cocoon or inside of the lock is susceptible to moisture locking inside for a prolonged period of time, long enough to grow mildew and mold. Yeah. So now I know I mentioned several other known names for this condition, but for the sake of this blog that I'm talking about, we're going to stay with the term Loc Rot, okay? To reiterate, Loc Rot is a growth of fungus such as mildew or mold that grows inside of the lock. The mold that grows, while it is smelly, it is not extremely dangerous and hazardous black mold that often grows in homes. So your safety as far as your respiratory system and stuff is not at bay here. So I just want to make that clear. Okay, the primary cause for Loc Rot is not allowing your locks to dry properly. Another way to help you to understand what I mean by not letting your locks dry properly. Okay, think of a damp towel that's been put in the hamper after you've been out to the pool or to the beach without fully drying it first, you know, and a day or two later when it's time to do the laundry and you pull it out of the hamper and you're like, what the hell? It's because you didn't hang it up or lay it flat to dry before you actually hold it up and put it in a enclosed space to dry properly before putting it in there. And it's the same mechanism with your locks. Okay, let me find my space. It is most noticed when your locks are damp and wet. So like if you do start to get Loc Rot or mold or mildew growing in your locks, you don't necessarily smell it like when your hair's dry unless you like really get close in there and smell it, but it's more noticeable like if you sweat or if there's moisture that comes to your locks. Then you're like, oh, what is that smell? And it's actually your hair, and that's terrible, but yeah. Loc Rot occurs so often because it is it's usually accompanied by lack of proper hair washing and buildup of products. The residue from product buildup makes it difficult for locks to dry properly, and the dampness creates even more buildup. This is the reason why it is so important to wash your hair regularly and consistently. It is important to thoroughly rinse the shampoo and conditioner from your hair to remove residue left behind from shampoo and conditioner, which, by the way, can prolong drying also. That's why it's important to make sure you thoroughly wash and rinse all of that out of your hair because it slows down the drying process. And if that's slowed down and then you go to sleep and your hair is more enclosed because you wrapped it up or anything, or you're laying on it, then it's not going to dry properly. Okay. Having low porosity hair that retains moisture for longer periods of time and takes longer to dry, has also been a common cause for loc rot to occur when the hair is not properly dry. So when you have low porosity hair and you've already penetrated within your lock with moisture, then that moisture is going to hold a lot longer because it doesn't let go of the hair, because it's hard to get it out of the cuticles. So you got to take a little bit of extra steps to really get in there. Okay. Yeah. Okay, now moving forward, some of the measures to take in order to properly dry your locks on wash day without causing heat damage from using high heat too often are as follows. Number 1, wash your hair earlier during the day and choose a day when you have time for yourself. So just stick with your self-care routines. Washing your hair late at night is often followed by sleeping on damp hair and keeping it wet for too long. Not to mention, the heat from wrapping your hair and sleeping on it speeds up the process of fungal growth. Okay. Number 2, use a microfiber towel to wrap your locks and wear the towel at least 30 minutes to an hour. If your hair is super dense due to low porosity and your hair is holding a lot of water, do a towel wrap a second time to assure that your hair dries in a decent amount of time. So usually I have clients that have low porosity hair, so the hair holds on to a lot of moisture. So I'll wrap the hair the first time and I'll leave that on for about 10 to 20 minutes, and then I'll take it off, and then I'll wrap it with a second dry microfiber towel for another 10 minutes before we get started. So the hair is still damp enough for me to do their retwist, but by the time I'm done with their retwist, their hair is like 90% dry, and they don't have to sit under a high heat intense dryer. And if it's warmer months such as spring and summertime, they can go on about their business, and the rest of their hair will be dry before they even get to their car usually. In the winter time, of course, I do take a hand dryer on a medium to low setting to really make sure that the roots that the hair is dry. But for the most part, their hair at the end is dried. I leave the towel on longer, so their appointment with me is a little bit longer, 10-15 minutes longer, because we leave the towel on a little longer. And during that time, while they're toweling dry, we can have conversation for education and things like that. So that's another plus side, that they rather towel dry than to sit under dry, because we can actually have those conversations for self-care at home. Yeah. So we're moving on to number 3. Utilize the sun and outdoor breeze to help dry your locks during warmer weather. Taking a walk outside is a great way to air dry your locks. Number 4, use a hooded or handheld dryer setting to medium or low cool air to aid in drying your locks during colder weather or when being outdoors is not an option. Avoid high heat to prevent dehydration and heat damage to your locks. So even if you're using a dryer, avoid using too much high heat, because it can dehydrate your locks, and that's not the goal here. A lot of times when people's locks are dehydrated or lacks moisture, they again oversaturate their hair with moisture, and then the hair doesn't dry properly, thus loc rot. So be careful, okay? Number 5, rinse, shampoo, and conditioner thoroughly to avoid buildup of shampoo and conditioner residue. Again, your hair does not dry properly if there's residue left in your hair. So be careful. Make sure you thoroughly rinse. And that's running water in and squeezing. Running, squeeze, run water, squeeze until the water, when you squeeze it out, it comes out clear. It should not be any kind of suds buildup or anything in your hair, okay? Number 6, keep locks separated and uncovered while damp, okay, to give your locks the space that they need in order to dry properly. So much like spreading out a damp towel to allow maximum space that it needs to dry quickly. A lot of times people, they style their hair or they put it in ponytail or something like that while it's still really wet, and the area where it's like really close and tight together, it stays wet like that, and it gives space and room for mildew and fungus to grow. So separate separate and let it dry, okay? And number 7, finally, do not oversaturate your locks during your moisture routines. A little goes a long way. And I don't mean to go and that's it and be afraid to moisturize your hair. Don't be afraid to moisturize your hair. What I'm saying is your hair doesn't have to be dripping wet for it to be moisturized. So I happen to have a refresher spray here on the table right here. So basically don't just do that and that's it, okay? Because that really barely touched the surface of my hair. Now I'm going to really make sure I get in there good. This is my aloe vera one, and I generally use it just on my scalp area, and I use my rose water refresher spray to make sure that my locks are nice and moisturized. And I like just more how the rose water feels on my locks, and my locks are really light in weight and stuff like that. So that just generally tells you how thoroughly clean I keep my locks, and I don't put a lot of product in my hair, so therefore they're light and they're not weighed down with a lot of heavy products that build up on the hair. Okay. Before I moved on, I want to note that your roots oftentimes will dry much sooner than your locks. Don't confuse that with, oh, my locks are dry. That's just your roots. Your roots are going to dry faster because the heat from your head is going to help them to dry faster. Okay. It is often assumed that the locks are dry upon discovery of the roots being dry. Roots and locks are often never dried at the same time. The roots always dries first. Okay. So don't assume because your roots are dry that your locks are dry. Not the case. Okay. All right. So what happens if it's too late and Loc Rot has set in? Well, there's no easy way to answer that question. It depends on how severe the case is. I will tell you this: try all that you can safely before giving up and by combing out your locks or cutting them off to remove the mold. As previously spoken, it does depend on how severe the case is. It does. Okay? In the case, if the case is extreme, right, you may need to cut off or comb out your locks and start over, unfortunately. If you choose to continue a lock journey, that's only if you choose to continue your lock journey. In cases not so severe, but the smell is potent and strong, then there may be hope for you. I mentioned in the previous blog how beneficial ACV, apple cider vinegar, is when it comes to treating your locks and your scalp for fungal infections, correct? Well, if you can recall, I mentioned then that ACV is an anti-fungal agent. I also mentioned in that same blog that tea tree oil is also an antifungal agent. So how do you use these two ingredients to treat Loc Rot? I will tell you how. There are 2 steps in this process, and this is what I do with clients who have mild cases of Loc Rot. You know, they come to me in the early stages where it didn't really settle in too much. Okay, let's get into that. Okay, number 1, antifungal detox soak. Using an inflatable basin filled with 2 gallons of warm to hot, closer to hot, right, water, and 2 cups of organic ACV, and 20 drops of tea tree oil. All right. I like to shake the tea tree oil with the ACV mix first. So I mix those together and then I pour it all into the water at the same time. And then I let them soak their locks for 10 to 20 minutes. I prefer the maximum of 20 minutes. Note, this detox does not include the use of baking soda. So do not add baking soda or lemon juice or none of that stuff. It's just ACV and tea tree oil. That's it, with the water to dilute it. Do not pour the ACV or the tea tree solution directly onto the locks. You pour it into the water. You mix it in with the water and dilute it in the water before submerging your locks into the water. I cannot stress that. Do not pour directly because it can cause damage to your scalp, and that's not what I want to do. Okay. That's what we do. So that's step 1. Let's move on to step 2. I'm not even going to stop this because that only took me a minute. After soaking your locks using a strong clarifying shampoo. I prefer to use the ACV clarifying shampoo that I use from Peculiar Roots. And follow with a good detoxing shampoo with tea tree oil in it, and conditioner with tea tree oil. So you can use ACV or what's the other one? ACV shampoo, Castile shampoo, which is also very strong, and that has to be diluted. Depends on what brand you use. And a good shampoo that has 5% tea tree oil in it, and conditioner that has 5% tea tree oil in it. It's really good to help with that. Okay, so this might, and again, I will not stress it, is not a 100% guarantee that this will remove Loc Rot, but it is a great attempt. All right. So this treatment should kill the fungus as well remove the smell of mildew and mold. If this treatment does not remove the smell of mildew and mold from your locks, it is likely the treatment did not work the first time. Okay? Don't be alarmed. We're going to try again. So what you're going to do, you're going to wait 72 hours, 3 days, and repeat the antifungal detox. So for a maximum of 10 to 15 minutes, preferably 15 minutes. And repeat with a thorough wash, rinse, and dry. Okay? If it does not work the second time, that is the time that you have to just accept the fact that perhaps it just did not work. You might want to try it for a third time, but it's highly doubtful that it will work. I've tried it a third time before with clients, and it didn't work. So if it does not work the second time, chances are the condition is far gone, and you'll have to probably comb them out or cut them off and start over. Okay? As you well know, I prefer preventive care by being proactive in order to prevent things from occurring than the aftercare of being reactive to what already occurred. So Loc Rot, unfortunately, is not uncommon. Oftentimes, it occurs as a result of not shampooing your locks consistently to keep the residue from building up in your locks. Many people with locks are told by professionals, no less, not to wash their locks often. You should wash your locks. Okay. That advice is often misinterpreted as going prolonged periods between washing. Please, please, please. Do not exceed 4 weeks or a month between washes. Okay. Wash your hair at the very least once a month if you have locks. Okay. Risk to your locks and scalp rinse rises tremendously once you've passed the threshold of 4 weeks, from Loc Rot to scalp fungal infections and so on and so forth. So it's not just the risk of buildup and things like that. It can affect your scalp. You can have buildup on your scalp, clog your follicles. You can have bacteria clogging and building up in your hair follicles, which can cause scalp infections or flare-ups of seborrheic dermatitis or other skin conditions, and allergens can really come into play when you don't wash your hair properly. So wash your hair as often as you can, but not too often. You don't want to wash away your natural essences either. Okay. Risk to your locks and scalp rises tremendously once you've passed the threshold of 4 weeks from Loc Rot to scalp fungal infections, as I said before. So please wash your hair. This is the part that should be made clear when professional lock technicians advise not to wash hair too often, because that's been a common thing in the past. But when you start your locks and your loctician or the technician will tell you not to wash your locks because it will delay locking of your hair. That is a myth. It does not delay locking up your hair. It's just a matter of the technique that you use when you wash your hair. So you got to be careful how you wash your hair so you don't unravel it and things like that. And I think that's where the fear comes in, because they don't want to have to keep retwisting and retwisting and retwisting. And then next thing you know, now we're talking about issues of thinning and hair loss and stuff like that. So you got to be very careful and understand, learn the technique. That's why it's important as a loctician to educate my clients on how to properly wash their hair. So I don't just tell them to wash their hair. You have to know how to properly wash your hair. And there is a proper way of washing your hair when you have locks. Whether you have starter locks or mature locks, there is a proper way to washing your hair. And for many, that takes education, because people didn't go their whole lives with locks. So you have to educate your clients. You have to educate yourself to learn and understand how to properly wash our hair. And that is what we are going to discuss next week on Locs Talk. So we have reached the end of this Locs Talk, and remember always to be proactive when it comes to caring for yourself and your hair. Okay? Thank you for joining me for another week of Locs Talk. And until next time, I wish you a happy and healthy lock and hair journey. From my chair to yours. Bye. Thank you.